Hello, welcome to the Solar Consumer Protections webinar. We're going to be getting started in just a minute. We want to give people a moment to join the Zoom room, get the tech figured out. So we're getting started right around 12:01. Hello, welcome everyone to the Solar Consumer Protections webinar. I'm really happy to see so many people interested as this is a really fascinating and interesting topic, and we have a great panel of experts here today to talk to us about it. My name is Abigail Jager. I'm a program manager with Solar Oregon, and I'm going to be helping moderate today's webinar. And first, we're going to look at some just quick housekeeping things as people join the webinar. First up, the organization putting this on is my organization, Solar Oregon. Solar Oregon is a 501c3 nonprofit that has worked to encourage solar and storage adoption throughout Oregon since 1979. We do this by providing reliable and impartial consumer education like this workshop, working to build the clean energy community, and performing outreach and some policy advocacy. We also facilitate solar tours, zero energy showcases, and other special topic events such as this one. If you're interested in learning more about Solar Oregon, you can go to our website, solaroregon.org, and follow us on Eventbrite and other social medias. Thank you so much for being here today. This workshop is supported by Energy Trust of Oregon. Energy Trust is an independent nonprofit established in 2002 that provides resources to help enable customers of the investor-owned utilities in our state to use energy efficiently and gain access to renewable energy. They offer key incentives for solar installation and battery storage. Energy Trust also coordinates a network of trade ally contractors who are able to offer these incentives. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about Energy Trust from one of their employees, Lori Law, who's part of our panel today as well. But we thank Energy Trust for their continued support. And if you'd like to find out more about them, you can go to energytrust.org. Now, throughout the presentation, if any questions come up, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can see what it looks like highlighted in orange, probably to my left, but it could also be above me. I never quite know where I'm at when I'm running these webinars and where I'm at on your screen. You can put your questions in there at any point in time, and we'll be going through them all during an extended Q&A at the end of the presentation. Now here, I'm going to introduce our three speakers we have today. The first is Warren Leon, who is the Executive Director of the Clean Energy States Alliance. Next, we have Lori Lowell, who is a Program Manager with Energy Trust of Oregon. And last, we have Angela Crowley-Cook, who is the Executive Director of the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association and has been doing great work as well. We're really excited to hear what they all have to say, and they'll all be talking about solar consumer protections. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Warren. Warren, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks very much. I'm going to give an overview from across the country of ways to think about solar consumer protection. And if we go to the next slide, before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the Clean Energy States Alliance. We're a national membership organization. We're a coalition of public agencies and organizations that are all working together to advance clean energy. We have members in 21 states. And in Oregon, Energy Trust of Oregon and the Oregon Department of Energy are both CESA members. If we go to the next slide, there are really three different types of ways to think about how to protect consumers in the solar arena. First is to help protect them from bad actors. Second is to provide them with good information. And third is to help them understand risks. If we go to the next slide, those are the three things I'm going to talk about. And start with protection from bad actors. That's the thing people normally think about when they think about solar consumer protection, not just for solar, but for any sort of commercial purchase that a consumer might make or a home improvement. There are concerns that bad actors might be out there who use deceptive sales practices or who may not follow through on what they promise. Um, the issues for solar are similar for the other home improvement projects, such as replacing windows or on major consumer purchases like buying a computer or buying a car. But it's more of an issue for solar for two reasons. First of all, few people who are thinking about installing solar on their house have done it before, so they don't have a lot of experience at purchasing solar. And second, there are few large solar companies with well-established reputations. When you go to buy a car, you probably know the reputation of the different companies. You go to buy a phone, you know the difference between the reputation of Apple and some fly-by-night company. With solar, it's less obvious. So if we go to the next slide, there are things individuals can do to deal with bad actors, and then there are things that governments and public organizations can do. On the individual level, somebody who's considering installing solar can make sure they talk with several companies. Don't just agree with the first one that reaches out to you. You can reach the company, research the company and its history. You can make sure to get multiple quotes from different companies and share them. You could look for trusted reviews and certifications. And finally, you can check references, and that's probably the most important one, is to get the names of people who've used the company before, who and talk to them about their experience with dealing with the company. That's at the individual level, but there are things that governments and public organizations across the country can do. And luckily, in Oregon, there's probably more attention been given to this than in many other states. So you're in relatively good shape there. And especially as we'll hear later, the recent solar legislation in Oregon helps strengthen consumer protection there. But among the things that can be done is to establish equipment standards, require minimum warranties that if somebody purchases a solar system, the inverter has to have at least a 10-year warranty, for example. You can require use of a standard disclosure form so that every company uses the same form so that a consumer can see more easily how the bids from different companies compare. They could try to figure out what's different about the bids, which one will save them the most money, which will provide them with the best service, and so on. Governments and public organizations can also report on companies' performances in a variety of ways. And then you can also certify solar contractors. The Energy Trust of Oregon's Trade Ally Contractor Program is particularly good. And I would suggest in Oregon, even if you're not in Energy Trust's service territory, I would still look at their list of trade allies in the solar arena to see if they also serve places where you live, even if it's not served by Energy Trust, because they've vetted those contractors pretty carefully. If we go to the next slide, even if you deal with bad actors, there's still a different consumer protection issue, and that's that consumers need good information. We could certify that most solar installation companies seek to deal with customers professionally and appropriately. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy for consumers or they won't experience problems. They may not fully understand what they're getting into, and the only way to deal with that is through information. Solar's inherently confusing. Unlike buying a cell phone, solar is customized for the site, so each installation is different. There are a range of financing options, loans, power purchase agreements, leases, and even purchase for cash, and all of those have pluses and minuses. It can be hard to make comparisons between different proposals from different companies, and it can be hard to figure out how much money will be saved. And then separate from rooftop solar, installations, some people participate in purchasing a share of a community solar project, and those community solar projects have their own distinct issues that are somewhat different than the consumer protection issues related to rooftop solar. So you need to look for good information from trusted sources. I want to point out three information sources on the CESA website, and there are links to them in this PowerPoint presentation. These documents are a little old, but they still have a lot of good information. One's a homeowner's guide to solar financing, goes through the differences between leases, loans, and PPAs and what questions to ask. Another is advice on consumer protection for community solar. And then we did a series of three short videos that the George Washington Solar Institute did for us on Solar Financing 101, on choosing a solar installer, and on the topic of whether solar panels would actually save you money. So I'd encourage you to look at any of those. And let me go next on the next slide to a related topic, which is understanding risk. We always need to ask when it comes to solar, does the consumer understand the risks? Even if they get a bid from a solar installer that suggests that, hey, this installation will cost you X amount of money and it will save you $50 a month over the life of the solar panels, there are some risks involved, and it's important for the customer to understand those risks. It's especially important for customers who enter into PPAs or leases, because oftentimes they do that without realizing they're entering into a big purchase. Somebody who decides to pay cash for a solar installation and they're going to have to pay $15,000 or $20,000, they know that's a big deal. They may think about what are the risks of them doing that. But if you enter into a PPA that's going to cost you maybe $75 a month in the first month and every month after, that may not seem so big. It may not feel like a big purchase. Well, there is always some risk involved. It's impossible to know exactly how the system will perform until it's in place. And even though solar systems are generally quite reliable compared to most energy systems and most things a consumer can purchase for their house, there can still be some maintenance issues. There can be unexpected problems. There also can be issues with the changing finances related to a solar purchase as electricity prices change over time. If they go up or they go down, that's going to impact how much money you save and how much, whether the solar installation continues to be a good investment. There also can be some low probability, high impact risks. An example of that is you have a warranty on an inverter. The inverter has problems, and you find out that the inverter company and your solar installation company have both gone out of business. Now, for most people, the risks associated with a solar installation are manageable, and the potential benefits outweigh them. And if a consumer does the calculations, they say, yeah, there's a small chance something will go wrong, but I could see how I'm going to benefit overall. It's worth me taking those risks. But the calculus may be different for low-income households. For them, even a small risk can be too much because somebody who's really on the edge financially, if they have an unexpected downturn of $50 a month, that could be the difference between whether they can pay their bills or not. So for a low-income household, if you tell them there's a 90% chance you're going to save $100 a month, but there's a 10% chance you're going to lose $50 a month. Even though that's a good deal, the risk still may be too great. And for low-income households, there needs to be a priority on risk-free arrangements. Well, those are some of the issues related to consumer protection for solar. If we go to the next slide, you can see my contact information. Thanks for your attention. I'll turn it over to Abby and the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Warren, for that overview. I think that was some really great background. And with that, I will turn it over to Lori. If any questions came up for you during Warren's presentation, like I said, please put them into that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be going through the Q&A at the end of the presentations. Lori, with that, I turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, and thank you, Abby in Solar Oregon for putting this on and having me join. So I'm Lori Lull. I'm a program manager with Energy Trust of Oregon's Renewable Energy team. Um, and we'll jump into the next slide and tell you a little bit about Energy Energy Trust, excuse me. Um, so we are an independent nonprofit, as Abby previously mentioned. We offer cash incentives, services, information to help people and businesses use less energy and save money on energy bills. So we connect them with clean, renewable power like solar. Who we serve the 2.4 million utility customers in Oregon and Southwest Washington, and I'll show you in a minute the service territory so you can kind of visualize the map. We've been around since 2002. In total, have invested 3.1 billion in utility customer funds. So, 842,000 sites. On the solar side, that's the 34,000 clean energy systems, billions in savings, and a whole bunch, 46.1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions kept out of our air. So that's what we do. Next slide. So you can see our service territory, particularly on electric. There's the shaded ones. So on the electric side, Portland General Electric and Pacific Power. And we serve all types of customers, including homeowners, renters, business owners, industrial facilities, farms, public entities like schools and cities. So a bit of what we do and where we are. Next slide. Okay, so jumping in to solar and consumer protection. So Warren was talking through some of the risks and particularly with how you select your contractor. We have a solution, which is our Solar Trade Ally Network. So these are the contractors in Oregon that are eligible to offer Energy Trust incentives. Currently, we have a Solar for Homes incentive, which is $2,500. Larger if you're a low to moderate income customer. And we also have incentives for battery storage. So that's in the range of $4,000 or $5,000, depending on your utility right now. Those change over time, and our solar contractors are well versed in talking about incentives and eligibility. But those are the only contractors that can offer our incentives. And in order to be in our network, you have to have current licenses, insurance. We check a percentage of projects. We have an installation standard that has equipment standards as well as standards around performance and longevity. And then we survey customers to ensure a minimum level of customer satisfaction. We'll work with our contractors on complaint resolution. So the takeaway here is if you're an Oregon customer and you go through our network, you'll have some assurance that it's a quality contractor. Next slide. Okay, one of the areas, and Warren mentioned a little bit around financing, where we've seen some challenging mo financing models, and so we've sponsored a financing product. So you can go through the Smarty loan that Energy Trust has supported that has transparency into terms, conditions, fees. Customers get the same interest rate no matter their credit score. And those can be used for solar and batteries and related work. So this is a residential product at this time. Um, so hopefully there's something to trust out there that customers can use for financing and utilize, the basis of this to ask more questions about what the fees are, about the product that your contractor may be offering. So next slide. A piece of what we do, and I can put some links in the chat, but our website has a lot of information about how to navigate contracts, how to, select your contractor, how to avoid scams. We also operate a request a bid tool, and that's the link at the bottom. I'll put it in the chat too, to help you get started. So if you're ready to talk to a contractor, we'll select 3 contractors and send that information. And we have a call center, that number that's listed on there. You also can email with questions. So we're happy to help customers navigate the process and get you going. So our and also just our blog in general. I'll put some links in the chat. Um, I think that might be my last one. So I'll pass it back to Solar Oregon.
Thank you so much, Lori. Um, look in those chat for those links, or are we putting them in momentarily? And with that, I'll pass it to our last presenter, Angela Crowley-Cook from OCS.
Thanks, Abby. Hi, everybody. My name is Angela Crowley-Cook. I'm the Executive Director of OCEA, the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association. We're the trade association for the solar industry here in Oregon. So, along with Energy Trust, we work with solar installers, both to make sure that there's good policy and regulations for solar, but also to hold the solar industry to a high standard. And that is why, you can turn to the next slide, Abby. This past legislative session, we wrote and passed a residential consumer protection bill. I was really happy to hear Warren talking about a disclosure form because that's the key provision of this new legislation. The legislation takes effect on June 5th, and it requires that all solar installers for residential solar include a new disclosure form. And that's really to ensure that everything customers are hearing from the salesperson matches up with what's in the contract. And so the disclosure form is kind of one step after the sales pitch before a contract is signed. And there's some rules there about, it has to be not more than 4 pages, not tiny, tiny print, can't be smaller than 10-point font. And there's places throughout that disclosure form to initial, in addition to some things being in all caps. So that we really worked hard to make sure the consumer is, seeing the most important parts and putting their initial there to make sure they're the important pieces are called out. One of the new important things that we're excited about in the bill and the disclosure form is that all fees have to be disclosed. Lori and Warren talked a little bit about financing, and this is an issue that we've been more and more concerned about, that some folks aren't disclosing lender fees in particular. And there is a reason for that. It's not just that a company has bad behavior. There is a kind of federal legal dispute about if those lender fees can be disclosed or not. by the lenders. However, it is legal for the solar company to disclose those lenders' fees. And so we borrowed what Washington State did and are requiring that all fees, including those lender fees, be disclosed in that disclosure form. And then the last piece I'll note is that we want to make sure that workmanship warranties are transferable to the new homeowner. So, workmanship warranty is when you have your solar system installed, and there's usually a workmanship warranty that says if we, the installer, made a mistake, we're going to come back and fix that for free. It doesn't apply to things like if the equipment breaks or if it got damaged in some way. The equipment itself has a manufacturer's warranty. This is really about the installation, and if the installer made a mistake, there's a warranty for a certain number of years. Well, that warranty should stay with the system, even if there's a new homeowner. But we learned that that wasn't always happening in practice. And so we made it clear in this new law that that workmanship warranty transfers over to the new homeowner within the initial time frame of the original workmanship warranty. So I'll paste the text to that bill in the chat. It's a little long because it goes over what has to be in the disclosure form for a purchased system and then a lease system and then a power purchase agreement. So because those sections are repeated 3 times, the bill does get a little long. But if you're interested in the wonky details, I'll put that link in the chat. And then I'll just say, this was created by OSEA members because we really want the solar industry to have a good reputation. It doesn't help us in having new solar customers if people are having bad experiences. So we worked together with consumer protection groups like Oregon Consumer Justice and OSPRG, as well as state agencies like the Department of Justice and the Building Codes Division and Department of Energy to make sure that we had a really good bill. So we did have a good bill and it passed unanimously through the House of Representatives, which is pretty rare and exciting, and then also received bipartisan support in the Senate. So like I said, that bill will take effect on June 5th. And so anyone that's looking to sign a solar contract after that time will have the ability to get that new disclosure form. That's all I really had. We're excited to have this new law in Oregon.
Thank you, Angela. I know I heard a lot about the consumer protection law when it was being discussed and was in some of the work groups talking about it, and I certainly am happy that it was passed unanimously and is going to become the rule starting this June here in Oregon. This June, correct? Not next June.
Right. This June.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, like I said, we now have time for a Q&A. I'm going to add in the text of the bill Angela was just talking about. Please put your questions in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I'm going to kick it off by asking, what are the most common misleading sales tactics homeowners encounter when considering solar, and what tips and tools can they use to help spot them early?
Okay, I can jump in on that one. So, um, there are certain solar sales companies that'll capitalize on customers' limited or partial knowledge of incentives, and generation to make it seem like they offer free or low cost systems. So, the thing that I would just say simply is that solar is rarely free. If you hear that the utility or energy trust is paying, call them. It's probably as simple as that. Verify the program is out there. So we do have some new programs that are coming up that are really exciting for low-income customers, and you can always call and verify eligibility, and that is the thing. A few other things to be aware of is really tight deadlines. You have to sign today, and that high pressure sales to get a contract signed quickly. And And if you do, know that in Oregon you have 3 days. So if you sign it and you're up all night going, "What did I do?" Review that contract in the next day, and you can cancel it. So a few other things that I would note is make sure if you're signing a contract for solar, that you understand the total cost and not just the monthly cost. And as Angela said, the financing fees have been a big thing, understanding the financing fees. So, thanks to her hard work in the industry, you'll be able to understand all of the financing costs associated if that's how you're proceeding. So,
Those
Hey,
are some
Abby, if
great
I
tips.
could add in, I thought that was a great answer from Lori, but let me add one other thing that is sometimes a misleading sales practice from solar companies where they structure the deal so that there are going to be savings in the first couple of months or the first year, and they hide the fact that some of the costs will go up over time or the savings will fall. And so customers really need to not just say, hey, you're going to save money next month. What are you going to do 5 years from now or 10 years from now?
That's a great point, Warren. You want to make sure you're reading the fine print carefully. And
Yeah.
hopefully, all the new consumer protection bill helps ensure that happens as when you're initialing something, you can read it at the same time. And I know I am frequently telling people that tip about being suspicious of the free and no cost solar, and thinking about the pressure to sign is also a great one. I hadn't really considered that one, though that definitely makes sense. Within the solar community, door knocking is ubiquitous. I feel like everyone's had that experience of the solar door knockers showing up. Are all companies that utilize door knocking untrustworthy?
well, I can jump in and start an answer to that. And I would say absolutely not. There's great companies that, might be in your area, and might knock on your door. That said, as a customer, you should avoid getting into agreements based solely on door-to-door sales. We recommend that customers get 3 bids, and that's a good way to compare one company to another, compare the pricing. Um, so, so I would say, you know, door to door is not necessarily a bad thing, but you do want to expand, and make sure you talk to other companies. I've heard the phrase that as a solar consumer, you should, what is it? You should buy solar, but not be sold solar. You should be an active consumer.
I like that, Lori. Yeah, that's really good. And I would agree that just because someone comes to your door doesn't mean that, it's a bad deal. But of course, solar isn't free, and that's something to really make sure that you find out before you sign on the dotted line. And I would say beware when you get those 3 bids. I agree, you should always get 3 bids for any home project, right? Not just for solar. Um, but sometimes we've found that bad actors are winning out of those 3 bids because it looks like they're the cheapest option. When if you're not showing the full amount of fees and the full cost of the loan, they end up being more expensive. So get those 3 bids and make sure for each one, if you're getting a loan, that you know the full cost of the loan and that you have all fees disclosed as they should be in that new disclosure form.
I'll add on a plug for Solar Oregon that we do a comparing solar quotes webinar monthly. So if you get those 3 quotes, but you don't know how to tell where the hidden fees are or what you should be looking at within it, that's a great free educational resource that you can sign up to attend live to get your questions answered. And recordings of it get posted on our YouTube channel. So that can be another great way in order to just learn more and make sure you are being an active consumer and that you are choosing to go solar and not being sold solar. Um, how can homeowners verify that a solar company is properly licensed, insured, and experienced with the Oregon solar landscape?
Okay, well, I'll jump in on this one. And I'm biased because we maintain our solar trade alley network. So we've done the work for you. So if you can verify that an energy tr or that a contractor is an Energy Trust Solar Trade Ally, you know that we're checking that they have the appropriate licenses and insurance and all of that. We're also checking performance. Um, but with any contractor, there's public pages, the Oregon Construction Contractors Board, you can check on their website and make sure, and you can ask about having insurance and licenses. So definitely want to do that. And I think Warren, you had more on your slides around checking for contractor licenses.
Yeah, there is some of that, but I just think if you are in Oregon where there is this great system in place from Energy Trust, I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to start with that if you're a consumer. And if you're dealing with a company who's not a solar trade ally of Energy Trust, one of my first questions for them would be, why aren't you? And have them prove that they meet the same standards that Energy Trust is using when they're vetting companies to be a solar trade ally. In some other states, it's harder because there's no vetting of any solar company by any state organization or nonprofit.
We are very lucky to have Energy Trust as a resource in this state. What resources are there to help evaluate bids after someone receives one?
Well, you mentioned
I
one, right,
I know.
Abby,
I'm
that
just
solar
trying to think what I
Oregon.
have. Well, the guide I listed, the homeowner's guide to leases, loans, and PPAs helps you do that to some extent. I don't know of a good online tool where you could just run bids through it and have the bid evaluated for you electronically. Um, but I would look at our homeowner's guide as a starting point for that. Or maybe there's something else in Oregon.
Yeah, and I also put in the chat from our website choosing a solar contractor. So we have resources on there to help that process.
And like I mentioned already, we do a Comparing Solar Quotes webinar monthly. You can attend live and we're happy to help answer your questions, or you can check out a recording on our YouTube channel. If you have any specific questions or it's not working on your timeline with when those webinars are scheduled, you can also reach out to us at info@solaroregon.org and we're happy to help answer questions and compare different quotes with you. So that's
So
another great
that
resource.
seems like the answer to your question then. You should attend the Solar Oregon webinar.
They are free, and I might be biased, but I think they're pretty fun. So if a homeowner is going to remember only three things before signing a solar contract, what should those three things be?
Okay, here we go. Contractor reputation, knowing you're working with a good contractor. Costs, making sure you understand the total cost, the monthly cost, and the timing. Warren had mentioned escalators. And then third, I would say warranties and guarantees. And that bonus, you have a right to cancel within 3 business days. So I did 3.5. Did I miss anything, Angela and Warren? Are there other three things?
No, those seem pretty good. I mean, I guess the one I would add to that is, what do specific references from specific people that the company referred you to say?
Yeah, I like everything everyone said. Agree.
Mhm.
Well, there are four and a half things everyone can remember before going solar. I'll add on my own to make it five and a half that I think a great resource is attending a How to Go Solar and Storage webinar. Learn what you need to know about how to go solar and how to know if your house is a good candidate for solar. Someone is wondering if any presenters have any horror stories of solar gone wrong.
Yeah, I could give a couple of horror stories. But one thing to say, the things have really changed. There's a lot more experience with solar out there than there was 20 years ago. Um, there's more mechanism in place to weed out or at least identify the bad actors. Um, and there's more knowledge among consumers that they really should be sort of doing things like getting multiple bids, and there are more, especially things like the disclosure form you're going to have there in Oregon, things like that will help. So tend to be fewer really bad horror stories these days than they used to be. But, I'll tell one story from when I was working at the Renewable Energy Trust of Massachusetts, which plays a similar role in that state to Energy Trust does in Oregon. There was one solar installer who was actually a former state legislator who was completely doing bogus things. He was signing things up, putting installations on people's roofs that weren't working equipment, weren't connected, and weren't going to generate electricity. And then he absconded with the money and left the state. That was at a time when he was getting people to sign up based on the fact that he was a well-known player in the state and wasn't really giving folks contracts that were laying out what really was happening. There are cases like that. There was just in the newspaper today or yesterday in New York State, the Attorney General is suing a company that has done like $500 million, I think it was, in bad solar contracts with folks. So that was a really extreme case. So there's still are some horror stories these days, but they tend to be relatively few compared to what used to be the case when the technology was newer.
Do you have something to add, Lori?
I'm sure I could add a couple. We occasionally will hear customer complaints. And like Warren said, the majority of what we hear is actually quite positive from our network. I can remember one customer issue where we had a woman who had gone solar and was trying to help the earth for the next generation. And the company had a very urgent deal. The company told her she would be swapping her electric bill and didn't understand that she was taking out a loan.
Mm.
Didn't understand that it was a loan, was very confused at it, and her prices went up. And unfortunately, it wasn't an energy trust trade ally, and so we really couldn't do a whole lot except refer her to the construction contractors board and the other authorities in Oregon. So. Yeah, and I laughed because I saw the one that Angela posted in the chat. Oh wait, yeah, in Solar Oregon. So there have been issues, but it's not dominating the industry. It's really not. It's not what we see on a day-to-day basis. We see minor things that our contractors in good faith do their best to resolve. So,
Someone has commented, thank you for sharing the stories, and that's good to know some of the tactics of the bad apples, and glad to hear that generally things are trending upward in the solar industry. And I would agree with that. I think there are always going to be those bad actors who are trying to take advantage to prey on people's naivety when it comes to things like solar. And we have some great protections in the Trade Ally program and in OSEA and Solar Oregon trying to prevent people from having a bad experience. Figure we can do one more question unless more come into the Q&A. But what happens if a solar installer goes out of business after installing a system? Who is responsible for maintenance and or warranty claims?
Well, that's a complicated question that tends to be different based on whether you have a lease, a loan, or a power purchase agreement. And sometimes when a company goes out of business, some other company steps in and takes over maintenance and service of those contracts. Sometimes it is a problem for the customer. To some extent, if it's a lease, it tends to be less of an issue for the customer than if they've taken out a loan because the lease means you would be having to pay money each month to the company, and if there's no company to take over to take the money, you don't have to pay the lease. But it can be an issue. I don't know if there are any special provisions that Energy Trust has that if one of your solar trade allies has a problem.
um, we don't have special provisions. So what we do have is we have our installation requirements, and they require, so you have your workmanship warranty, which the contractor is responsible for. You have warranties for different parts of the equipment. So and we require a certain level for different things. So inverter warranty, module warranty, and battery storage systems have a required warranty on throughput. So for manufacturer warranty, they should follow the system, and our contractors are required to be providing the manufacturer data sheets so the customer can follow through on it. The workmanship warranty, we've had situations where there's another contractor will help out, but that is a risk. And one thing that customers should be aware of, especially when they're entering agreements that are, say longer than 10 years, longer than 15 years, is that you should have, a little bit of a budget for potential expenses, like a new inverter or something like that. So that may not last a full 25 years.
One other thing I would say that people who are going to be getting a solar system should do is to check with the company that you have homeowners insurance with to find out what does the homeowners insurance cover in relationship to problems with system damage or maintenance problems, or if a tree falls on it or something like that, so you understand what is and isn't covered by your regular insurance.
I will also say that I know one of the options when you are looking at the list of Energy Trust trade allies is you can also filter for trade allies that have indicated to Energy Trust that they are willing to help out with maintenance of systems. And so if you have an older system and maybe your original contractor has gone out of business or isn't servicing your area anymore, that is a great way to make sure you are still working with a reputable contractor and you're able to filter for that, like I said. So that's also a great way to utilize that trade ally list, even if you're not getting a completely new system. Well, thank you everyone so much for your time and participation in this webinar. I really appreciate it. I feel like I got some great questions answered. If you'd like to request a free custom analysis and bid for a solar system, you can scan that QR code currently on the screen. I know it's also linked in the chat. Some great resources there. And a round of virtual applause for our three presenters. I really appreciate your participation in today's webinar. If you want to review any of the information covered, a recording will be emailed to everyone sometime over the next few days. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.